Okay, so the deep connection of God that we're talking about, the deep connection with God that we're talking about here, is the grace of contemplation, or is found in the grace of contemplation, and the gift that's being offered to us as our world narrows, the gift of going deeper, is that gift of contemplation, I would want to suggest, and want to open up to us the possibility that we might receive this gift in our lives and become more contemplative people, which would be an extraordinary gift, an extraordinary blessing if that could happen in any of our lives. But if it was to happen for us as the Church of God, if it was to happen for us as the people of God, it would be a wonderful thing, a tremendous thing for the church. Anyway, so what I want to do is spend a few minutes reflecting on what is the contemplative gift. Contemplation can be thought of as a set of values that are contrasted with action, active values. That would be a classic way of understanding what contemplation is, that our lives are a combination of contemplation and action. And so I just want to just list a whole lot of values and properties and qualities so that we can get a bit of a sense of what contemplation is. So first of all, contemplation is found especially in silence, and the active life tends to be noisy. The contemplative life is especially in stillness. The active life more in busyness and hurry. As I've been saying all along, the contemplative life is about depth, and the active life is broad, but perhaps shallow. The contemplative life is, or contemplation is, receptive, whereas the active life is more productive. Now, I've got a whole other list, twice as much again, but I just want to pause here. I think as we look at this contrast, we can already begin to see our lives are kind of like this, aren't they? This describes our lives much more than this. And for many of it, well, for me, certainly, for many of us, I think we look at that and something inside imagines a quiet pool and a gentle breeze and a deep sigh. We can recognize a certain longing for this. And that might just be an ordinary human reaction. It might not be anything terribly religious about that, but it's already indicating to us that our lives are needing this. Our Western lives especially are so much on this because we value activity. We prize it. We pay money for it. This stuff, contemplation, is more elusive, doesn't perhaps immediately look valuable or exciting, but we have this real deep need for it. I want to just say, before I go on with the rest of the list, I just want to say a couple of things about silence and stillness, because they're really the essence of it in many ways. Blaise Pascal, 17th century mathematician, philosopher, physicist, and Christian mystic. He was actually, he's known as a mathematician and philosopher, but he was actually also a great mystic, which means he was in touch with the deepest things of God in a way beyond what most of us are. He said, get this, he said, all the problems of humanity come back to our inability to sit still in a chair in our own room. Let's see if I've got that quote right. All of humanity's problems come from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. How about that, eh? All of humanity's problems come from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Now, look, I don't even know what happened to him to make him say that, but it seems pretty profound to me. We create so many problems for ourselves because we can't sit still in silence. We just can't. Another thing about this, apparently recently, now I haven't looked this up, so I might get some of the details a little bit wrong, but a university did a study where they put a person in a chair, in a room, on their own, in silence, with no stimulation of any kind. And if the person wanted to, they could press a button and administer an electric shock to themselves, a painful electric shock. This was a test, and apparently the large majority of people preferred to sit there pressing the button, giving themselves electric shocks. They preferred that to sitting still, doing nothing without any stimulation. They preferred. It's astonishing, isn't it? We see this and something inside us goes, and yet it's difficult. Often we'll only do this if we're forced to. And we're being forced to. That's the point. We're being forced to. Well, not quite, because you can sit in front of your computer screen all day if you want to. You can be on the phone all day. You can be on WhatsApp, FaceTime, Skype, whatever. I don't know. But naturally speaking, we're being forced to be more still. And we're going to find that a little bit difficult, and we have to go through a process of the discomfort. I mean, the story about the university test illustrates the discomfort. But I hope that you can see as we go through this list also how attractive it would be to have the contemplative values in our lives. Another contemplative value would be enjoyment versus, already did production, didn't I? Enjoyment versus achievement. So enjoyment is just being with what I'm receiving, what's happening, and appreciating that rather than trying to make something happen. So again, it's receptive as opposed to productive. Contemplation is about now. Activity is about not yet. In activity, we're trying to make something happen. Our minds are on something that is going to happen through this activity, whereas contemplation is about what is now. There's a deep attraction in now. Contemplation is about here. Action is about somewhere else. Contemplation is here and now. Action is looking towards somewhere that we're going to get to. This list is just as these things occurred to me. So there's no order to it. Contemplation is mystery, whereas action is knowing. contemplation is, now you may not actually like this one, contemplation is vulnerability, whereas action is power. Perhaps we start to see something of why we prefer this side. Because to be with the way things are here and now and let them be that way does bring enjoyment, but it also potentially brings suffering, because there are certain things about here and now that aren't great, that I don't like. And the contemplative is not trying to change those things. It's trying to let them be. So enjoying what is good, but also being vulnerable to what is perhaps not what I would have liked. Contemplation is focus, whereas action is scattered, divided. So remember earlier in the previous input, I was talking about the one thing necessary versus many things. So contemplation focuses on the one thing necessary. Now this is, the next couple are deeply attractive, I think. Contemplation is me as I am. Action is me as I should be. Does that feel attractive? To be able to be who you are, to not have to be fighting against who you are, to try to be someone that other people tell you should be, or you feel like you ought to be. Contemplation is rest. Action is work. Now, I suppose the way I've been talking all along might sound as if I'm saying this is good, this is bad. Not at all. Not at all. This is Martha, this is Mary, and Martha's a saint too, right? Martha was a great lover of Jesus and is a model of the active life. And most of the saints, or many of the saints, were extremely generous in active service for the world. It's not that this is bad. It's just that our lives are meant to be this plus this, and most of our lives are only this. Or 99% this, you know. Our lives are sick, really, I would want to say, if they're 99% this and 1% this, or 100, 0. Our lives we're only living half a life if we're all on this and nothing on this. Our lives would be balanced, they'd be healthy, they'd be whole if we could allow these values and these realities into our life. It does take effort, it does take discipline, as the story of the electric shocks illustrates rather spectacularly. And I mean, we know, looking at the list, that there's a fair amount of difficulty in, vulnerability and mystery, in letting myself be who I am. I feel like that's kind of scary. There's a cost to this, but the reward is tremendous. Must say though, if I want to advocate for a balance, for a pendulum swing, from we've been all this way, let's come this way a bit, folks. If I want to advocate for a balance between the two things, Jesus does actually say in Luke chapter 10, the one thing necessary is on this side. Actually, if you had to choose, you'd choose this one. This is the essential thing. This is the more important thing. Get this right. And this is all the great contemplatives of the church say this. Get this right, and this falls into place. Get this right, and this will come right. But if we devote our lives to this and this side is left out and neglected, our lives are going to be scattered and divided and unsatisfying, and even our activity won't be what it should be, won't be what it could be, because it's lacking a depth and foundation that contemplation could bring to it.